Hey Philadelphia, Cleus here. Um, it's been a long time since I've done a video. Over 3-4 years now since I've posted my last video. So what's the sudden urge of me actually putting together video right now? One of the components was actually looking at what's been going on here in Philadelphia lately, especially in the summer. It's the killing spree. So within the last 2 weeks I was able to engage in 2 outcries for the city. One of them in North Philly and the other in West Philly. Basically to stop the violence or stop the gun violence, stuff like that, the rally. And to me, this is something that's been going on for decades. It's the same approach that we use. So what I would like to do is actually share something that's very important when you're talking about dealing with a challenge such as the crime rate here in Philadelphia and other parts of the world. And it's funny because this can also be applicable to something that's challenging to you too, not just the crime. So when I'm dealing with a client and we're offering what we call therapeutic service to the client, we don't look at what behavior the client exhibit so much as to what triggered the client to express such a behavior. So when we are applying therapeutic interventions, we're not applying it to the behavior of the client. We're applying it to basically what triggered the client. Perfect example. Say we're dealing with a client and they're having a sibling issue, and each time the sibling is around, the client actually expresses some type of off-task behavior. Instead of saying, okay, this child has an off-task behavior and treat that, we actually look at what's triggering the child to develop that off-task behavior. When you realize that it's a sibling and you apply something that could intervene between both siblings, then that now rectify the problem itself. So when it comes to crime, it's the same thing. There's the crime, right? And then there's the case. So typically what goes on is that people spend their time solving the case. And when you solve the case, right, the crime still exists. So you can solve the case and say, okay, this is the person who shot such and such, and they get arrested and they're put behind bars. But the next day there's another person that comes up and shoot another person again. So the crime is not really solved, they just solve the case. In that aspect, we have to start looking at it. What are the things that are triggering the people to squeeze the trigger? So I would call this the trigger of the trigger. We look at what is it that's triggering the people to act in such a violent manner against each other, rather than just looking and saying, hey, you know that this person killed such and such and they deserve to actually go behind bars. Because when we continue to look at it from the standpoint of just locking up people, we don't really get to the root of what's really causing this massive outcry. And why I say a massive outcry, people are going through a lot. And the things that actually trigger them will cause them to express in certain violent manner. So when we're talking about the violence here in Philadelphia, we need to start looking at the aspect of saying what's actually causing the trigger. And if you notice what I did, I actually looked at a job duty that we apply. I didn't look at the violence itself. I look at the job of therapeutically applying interventions. So that's another aspect that we have to look at when it comes to solving crime. We can't typically look at the crime. We got to look outside. And this is a known fact, like for people who are scientists. They typically study, like you'll hear about people studying rats and other types of animals. And they're actually studying these things so they can have a better understanding of human beings. So this is the same component. When you're trying to solve something, you don't typically look at that thing. You look at something else and find a correlation within that thing and then apply it to what you're trying to solve. Which is also said in Einstein, and I'm paraphrasing, he said that the thought that brought you in the problem, the level of thinking that brought you in the problem can't be the level of thinking that actually gets you out. So this is the context of what I'm saying. Look at something else that's along the similar lines, and then if you understand that thing, then you can turn around and solve the problem that you're actually having. Which is the same, as I said, it's not just for crime. When you exhibit some type of behavior, look at what triggered that behavior. You act a certain way, or you said something to someone, look at what triggered you in that manner. So this is a tip that I would like to share with the city of Philadelphia here, in understanding that when it comes to the killing spree, we got to solve the crime and not the case. Solving the case is just putting someone behind bars, but here comes another killer tomorrow. And as I said, I was involved in two of the, what I would call the rally for peace, stop the violence and stuff like that. But in essence, that's what we've been doing for decades, probably even centuries. We need to start looking at the crime aspect. If we can solve the crime, then we can get rid of what's going on and not looking at just solving the case. And the crime is typically the things that are triggering us to act a certain way or to say certain things. So that would be my tip for the city of Philadelphia, who is now plagued with a high crime rate from one part of the city to another. And it's funny, even in Center City, the crime reached. I know there was a realtor that was stabbed to death a couple weeks ago, and that was actually in Center City. So if it reached all the way to Center City, you know something is actually wrong, because when you talk about violence, you typically don't hear anything about the Center City. That's like the place where everything is secure down there. So again, I would just like to offer that as a tipping mode, saying that, hey, we're in the city and this is my contribution of how I think I could actually help. All right, until next time, have a good one.